children, pay the price, so we want oh, children, home, oh, to Zion, oh, wanna go, take me there.
Good evening, Dominica, the Caribbean, and the rest of the world, and welcome back to our #1 program for navigating a world where change is the only constant, where we harness the power of technology, international radio, social media, and podcasts to leverage the skills and talents of our worldwide experts for guidance in this ever-changing world. And today is no exception. We've been hearing a lot about change that is coming to Dominica in terms of the changing rate of electricity in Dominica. So today we are joined by members of the Independent Regulatory Commission, the IRC, and they will provide us with the much needed guidance on this topic. So welcome to another episode of Roots Connections on Q, right here on Q95, the big station. As always, we look forward to hearing from you, our audience, whether you join us via the radio and you call in at about 9 p.m. or you're joining us on the internet on Facebook at Q95 FM radio, on Facebook at Push Past 10, or you're joining us on YouTube at Q95 FM radio. That is why we're here, Roots Connections. We are committed to looking at changes we should be concerned about, the changes we should be taking advantage of, and what changes we need to make in order to move our island and our region forward. So again, a very warm welcome to you. This is episode number 80 of Roots Connections on Q for today, October 23rd, 2024. And I am your host, Simone Matthew. So as I mentioned before, we are joined by members of the IRC. They're actually members of the IRC Rate Review team. So we're happy to be joined by the Executive Director, Mr. Justin Case. We're also joined by Mrs. Connie Joseph Lewis, the Financial Analyst. And we are joined by a man who shares many of my memories from our days when the Dominica State College was called the Sixth Form Community College, Sipacol. Mr. Jason Timothy, very happy to call him a friend. So we're happy that they're joining us today to guide us on this very important topic. And as we get started, they will tell us about a little bit about themselves and also the role that they play with the IRC. But before we get started, we always like to ensure that we say a prayer for our country, Dominica, and all the challenge that we face in the Caribbean. And I also want to say a very pleasant good evening to everyone who is visiting Dominica for the Independence season. Last year at this time I was in Dominica, so I know that you're certainly enjoying yourself. So remember, wherever you are, remember to celebrate all that is beautiful and vibrant about Dominica. So let us take a moment and meet our guests as we ask them to unmute their mics and just tell us a little bit about who they are and their role with the IRC, while I go ahead and share the Facebook and YouTube Live to everyone who's waiting for the link. So Mr. Case, we will begin with you this evening.
Okay, I am Justin Case, the Executive Director of the Independent Regulatory Commission. I like to say that the Independent Regulatory Commission regulates the electricity sector in Dominica and shouldn't be confused with the NTRC, which regulates the telecom sector. My role is to manage the day-to-day operations of the IRC, among many other duties that has been assigned to me by the Act, or the mandate, carry out the mandate of the Act number 10 of 2006. This Act basically lays out the mandate by which the IRC operates.
Yes, thank you. Mrs. Joseph Lewis, over to you.
Well, I am Connie Joseph Louis. I am the financial analyst at the Independent Regulatory Commission. My role involves reviewing Dominic's financial statements, conducting periodic audits, reviewing fuel consumption, fuel used, and assessing the financial soundness of the utility and reporting to the executive director of my findings.
Yes, thank you. And Jason, over to you.
Okay, good evening, Simone. It's been a long time. Good evening to all your listeners. My name is Jason Timothy. My role at the IRC is projects officer. That mostly entails technical analysis and giving technical advice on certain developments at Domlec in the sector and how it can affect the sector long term and things that can be done to improve what's going on. So, yeah, that's kind of the long and short of what I do at the IRC.
Yes.
I kind of give a little bit advice on the renewable energy portfolio as well, as that's kind of my um, background, really.
Yes, so thank you for your introductions and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for this very educational and informative program. So as we see folks are coming in on the Facebook Live, guys, don't forget to share the live as you're coming in. Remember to click the notification button so you will always know when we go live. We remain grateful to Mr. G, the Q95 family, Sherwin, Lambi, for giving us an opportunity to be here every second and fourth Wednesday as we continue to tap in to the human resources, our Dominican experts who help us to reverse that brain drain that has plagued the Caribbean region for a very long time. So again, if you're just joining in, we're here with the IRC and we're going to be breaking down the terminology and discussing the way forward for electricity in Dominica. Because in all honesty, I have listened to a number of the programs from the IRC. And what I am finding based on what I hear the callers, the questions and concerns that the callers are expressing, is that by nature, and Jason already said it, this is a very technical field, right? I think we can all agree with that. So when we talk about electricity, we talk about power, we talk about energy, we have to admit that it's a very technical field. So what I want us to do today is really focus on breaking down the concept so that the average person, the general public, can get a better understanding of exactly what we're referring to. Because I'm assuming, if I'm assuming correct, that these education programs are really meant to not only raise awareness for the general public, but to educate them. So I think it is very important that we break down the terminology so that people have a better understanding of what we are talking about. And the first thing I want to throw out there, because it is one that is used very often, is the tariff. So I'm assuming Ms. Joseph Louis, you can probably tell us, since you're the financial analyst, what exactly are we talking about when we speak about a tariff? Because that is a term that we will hear over and over in our conversation.
Well, the tariff is basically the rate or the charge that person's customer would pay for a kilowatt hour of electricity. So in simple term, it is the rate or the charge or the fee that customer pays for a 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. So the unit of measurement for electricity consumption is kilowatt hours. So if, for instance, you use 50 kilowatt hours and the rate is 50 cents, it will be 50 cents multiplied by 50 kilowatt hours, and you know what is the rate. So the IRC at this time is undertaking the study for the tariff review to determine what the rate of electricity will be through a 3-year period.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So we will, if you guys don't mind, what I will try to do as you're giving your explanations this evening is I will try to summarize it based on what the average person would be able to understand. So I know, you're still going to get caught up in the technical terms because that is the world that you live in. So I'm going to make every effort, and I hope that you don't mind if I have to interject to ask you to give some further explanation because I'm listening with the ear of the general public in mind. So I also think it is important because I get the sense that people are wondering, why is all of this important? Why is the IRC working with DOMLEC? Why is all of this important? So what I thought we could do, Mr. Case, is we can look at DOMLEC from the beginning. So let us look at what DOMLEC was before the IRC, because I think that will help us to understand why it was important for the IRC to get involved with the operations of DOMLEC. So kind of tell us about DOMLEC before the IRC.
Okay, so DOMLEC before the IRC was guided by the mandate of the Act of 1996. Okay, now in that act, any rate reviews were controlled by or reviewed or done by the Public Utility Commission, which was an office that was established in the Ministry of Public Works and Utilities. Okay, so what would then happen would be that DOMLEC would submit their accounts or their financial information, and it would be reviewed by the PUC upon a request from DOMLEC for a rate review. That would be done at a time when, periodically, so that DOMLEC's viability could be assessed and ensure that the utility is kept viable over the period. The reason for that is due to things like inflation, rising prices, rising operational costs, cost of fuel, and all of that impacts DOMLEC's operations. So every 3 years, utility rate review would be requested by DOMLEC and it will be submitted by the PUC to the PUC, who will review it and approve or not approve it. This is how it would happen. Okay. Now, fast forward to where we are now.
Right.
The IMF looked at the sector and they made a request for the liberalization of the sector. Now, when the sector is liberalized, you need someone like a referee. I'm trying to say it in simple terms to basically regulate the activities in the sector. Without that, you could have chaos. Okay, so you have a liberalized sector and you need a regulator to set the rules of engagement within the sector. I'm trying to say it in the best and simple way I can. Okay, now, so this Act of 1996 was superseded by Act number 10 of 2006, and this is where the IRC was created upon the liberalization of the sector. The IMF, if you look at the document that was guided the liberalization of the sector, it had to do mainly with poverty reduction. So what it is that persons could self-generate, okay, if it was cheaper for them to do so, and therefore not be connected to the grid or or as we would say in Dominica, connected to DOMLEC. So they had an option to say, well, all right, the grid electricity is too costly for me. I'm going to go on my own and have my own power. Okay, so this comes with its own risks, and the person that's appealing to self-generation must understand that they are responsible for their for risk for maintaining their generators, be it a renewable energy generator, be it a thermal generator. They are responsible, and it can be very costly for someone that goes independent of the grid to sustain their independence due to this cost. Okay, it should be cheaper to be on the grid, relatively cheaper to be on the grid. Okay, so that's where it is. Now, so as a result of that, now Domlec was issued two licenses in 2013, 2014, an exclusive license for transmission, distribution, and supply, and a license, a non-exclusive license for generation. So in the regulatory world, we adopted a model what they call the one buyer, one seller model. Okay, so Domlec is the only entity that can buy or sell electricity to the customer, but the customer is free to self-generate if they wish. Okay, there are numerous technologies out there that can allow the customer to self-generate. Now, the mandate of the IRC includes a lot of, we have a lot of different sections to our mandate. Okay, uh, there are a lot of functions that we have in terms of regulating the sector. We also have the ability to issue licenses to players within the sector, both utility scale and what we call distributed renewable energy facilities, generation facilities. We also approve tariffs for Domlec. Um, we also have a role to play with setting standards for sector. Okay.
So let
We
me let
also
me let me jump in so far, Mr. Case, and thank you so much for all this information. But let me just kind of summarize what you've said so far. So you're saying that the IMF, in an effort to reduce poverty, requested that there be some kind of referee to regulate electricity so that companies like Domlec could not simply just raise prices at will. So that is what the role that the IRC, the important role that the IRC is playing in Dominica. So I just want to make sure we're captioning everything that you're saying. Now, let me go over to Jason because I also want to make sure that we're touching on all the points that are relevant to this conversation. So we also know that the government acquired a percentage of Domlec. So was there any implications? Is this connected in any way to the IRC and the formation of the IRC?
Technically, no, there is really not a direct connection. I think at the end of the day, we need to be realistic and realize everything is a nice little ecosystem. So even though something might not be directly connected, there are some implications indirectly because something that happens at the end of the chain can affect a link 50 links down if I'm trying to be couching my words nicely. So it is, but it's not directly connected. At the end of the day, one of the things the regulator has to do is kind of help with the planning of whatever generations should go on the grid. Um, and we have to realize that a private sector company is going to operate slightly differently than a publicly owned sector company. And at the IRC, we have to balance those depending on who the owner is at the time. We need to look at what's going on and see how best to manage not only in the interest of the consumer, but also in the interest of maintaining DOMLEC. Because whilst it's nice to say everybody can self generate, there are implications to that, in that the people who cannot afford to self generate sometimes end up paying a higher price, because you now have a smaller subset of people having to maintain the same amount of lines. So whether we have 70,000 people on the grid from Roseau to Portsmouth, or 20,000 people from Roseau to Portsmouth, the lines still need to be paid for, because Dominica is 98% electrified. Technically it's 100, but for all practical purposes, we need to use 98, because there's no line running into the middle of Mon Espanol. So you kind of take out, but at the end of the day, all of these lines need to be maintained. So if you have a smaller number of people who have to maintain these lines, it's actually going to cause the cost of electricity to go up for these smaller number of people. So there's a delicate balancing act we at the IRC have to do, to try as best as possible to keep the price affordable to the consumer whilst maintaining the viability of the utility. Because if the utility isn't viable, then a whole set of people are going to suffer. So it's just one of those things where now that it's government owned, we have to look at things slightly differently as to how we advise Domlec.
Yeah, and the reason I was throwing out this question as well, because I also think it is important for us to look at myths and misconceptions that might be surrounding the work of the IRC. Because one of the things many of our listeners and viewers may thinking is, all this is coming about because, speaking of the private sector, like Jason just mentioned, we lost a major part of the private sector in Dominica, which was Ross University. So, we have to address the myths and misconceptions. What is connected, what is not connected. So again, throwing that out there, does that have any implication? Is that a myth? Is that a misconception? Anyone can feel free to answer.
Well, I wouldn't say it's it's both, actually. It's both. The thing about it is, um, again, one of our ails are we don't have economies of scale. And if we had economies of scale, things would be cheaper. And this doesn't only apply to electricity. This applies to groceries. This applies to almost everything. It's like, if you order one bottle of water from, you import it from Amazon, it's automatically going to be more expensive than if you order a container of water and you save on you get the volume discount, basically. So Ross leaving did affect Domlec, in that that is that was a big chunk of electricity that got paid for. That now, maintaining those lines now passes on to the rest of the consumers who are left behind. So it's there are always, again, as I said earlier, it's a ecosystem, and we cannot pretend like everything isn't connected. Everything is connected. So there are always going to be r- trickle down effects of almost anything.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, Mrs. Joseph Louis, let me come to you because I think another question that comes to mind, and of course, we're going to delve more into the work of the IRC, but I think these are important concerns to address up front. Another question that comes to mind, is there a similar commission and IRC in other islands of the Caribbean?
Yes, they are. So, for instance, you have OUR in Jamaica, that's Office of Utility Regulation in Jamaica. You have Fair Trading Commission in in Barbados. You also have PUC in Belize. I think Grenada has a regulatory commission. St. Lucia has a regulatory commission. The Grand Cayman has a regulatory commission. So it is established among the region.
Yes, thank you. So back to you, Mr. Case, because we know that in 2021, Dominic made an application to the IRC for a tariff review, and we've already explained that the tariff is the cost for electricity, the rate that we pay for electricity. So again, in 2021, Dominic made an application to the IRC for a tariff review. Why was that needed?
Okay, so this tariff review that Dominic applied for was long outstanding. It is needed due to the fact that Dominic hasn't had a tariff review since 2007. Their last rates were approved in 2007. Okay, so 2007 to 2021, that's a long time. Okay, so Dominic was operating on the old rates since the IRC came into existence. So one attempt was made at a tariff review in 2013, 2014, just after they received their new licenses. That didn't end well, as Dominic took the IRC to court on a disagreement with the weighted average cost of capital, which is like the rate of return for Dominic. Okay, rate on return to the shareholders and Domlec's operations in terms of making enough funds to cover their operations and any increases that they may encounter due to cost of operations.
And let me just jump in. Let me just jump in real quick, Mr. Case, if you don't mind, because our audience might be getting the sense that Dominic and the IRC are in cahoots. So you're saying that there was actually a lawsuit, so that they're not in cahoots. The IRC is simply regulating electricity. So, they're not conspiring to get together to raise rates of electricity in Dominica.
Not at all. We are not conspiring. As the regulator, we have to balance the interests of the government, the public, and Dominic. And it can be a very challenging act for us. Okay, so we are not in cahoots with Dominic as most people may think. Okay, we, as the regulator, to be quite honest, most regulated entities wish the regulator never existed, because we have to do our due diligence to ensure that the information that they're providing us with is accurate for input into the calculations for the rate. Okay, and if the information is, let's say, the quantities that they supply are too high, it can result in higher rates. If it's too low, it could also be too low for Domlec to exist. Okay, so, or to meet their cost. So it is very important that we review the information and ensure that it is accurate, as well as ensuring that Domlec doesn't engage in any activities that will feed into unnecessarily higher rate.
And let me jump in as well. And this is for Jason and Mrs. Joseph Louis. So part of the application, right? So the process of the tariff review hinges on Domlec's submission of relevant tariff-related documents from the IRC review. And this is where it becomes very technical. So I want us to really walk through these particular points. The tariff-related documents must be reviewed for this exercise are Domlec's depreciated study. So whoever is most proficient on that particular topic, you can take it. But let me just acknowledge everyone who's joining us on Facebook and YouTube. Guys, remember, if you would like to be acknowledged for being here, you can simply post a message to say good evening, hi, so I can acknowledge that you're here with us. So what are we referring to when we talk about DOMLEC's depreciation study?
Okay. Well, Dominic depreciation more or less has to do with the written down value of the assets. Dominic has a lot of assets, so they have engineering assets, they have transmission and distribution assets, they have the building, the generators, office furniture, equipment, and all these things are considered the fixed assets. And we are talking about hundreds of $1 million in assets. So we want to determine how much, what rate should be applied to each of the assets to determine at the rate at which the asset loses value over time. So for instance, you have a car and they will tell you the car has 5 years, 5 years useful life, and every year that car goes down in value
Yep,
until
depreciates.
it has a zero balance or scrap value. So the same thing applies to Dominic assets. We look at the assets as part of our review. We looked at 2021 as fixed asset register, and we conducted an audit based on the sample size of Dominic assets. We went to the far out district in the interior. We look at the poles, we look at the generators, we look at the transmission assets as indicated, and we were able to determine whether these assets exist. So the objective of the audit was to determine whether these assets that Dominic is indicating that they have on their books, whether the sample size that we selected these assets were in existence. And therefore, once we were able to look at the assets, we were able to determine what is the applicable rate to be applied to the assets. This, of course, was done in 2021, and following that led to the establishment of a depreciation study to be undertaken by the IRC. So we did, of course, a comprehensive review, and we were able to determine what rate should be factored into the depreciation, for what depreciation rate should be factored for those assets. We did that study in earlier in the year. I think it was around February, if my memory serves me right. We did a public consultation. Dominic presents their findings in terms of the assets that they have in their books, and IRC, of course, presented a review of all the assets that they looked at and the applicable methodology, the approach, because there's an approach to which you calculate the depreciation. So this methodology or this approach, it's in the outline into our mandates. That is IRC's tariff regime document. So they outline the methodology to be used. At the consultation, of course, stakeholders like customers and business people, whoever took part in the consultation, expressed their view, raised questions, and therefore we were able to arrive at a depreciation rate that stakeholders felt that was comfortable. Why the depreciation rate? Because the depreciation rate forms an important part in determining what is the required revenue that Domlek is supposed to make.
Right, and that is exactly where I was going. So, all of this kind of speaks to the revenue needed by Dominic. And feel free to correct me if I make any statements that are incorrect. So far, what we're talking about is the rate review, whether to increase the rate of the tariff, the rate that the customers are paying for electricity to improve Domlec's revenue. And then the factors we are looking at is what is taken into consideration for that during that rate review. So is that correct that we're looking at if the rate should be increased so that Domlec's revenue can be increased, its operational costs can
Okay,
be.
that is not precisely correct.
Okay, please explain.
Okay. So, and this is something I try to explain to people. What we need to look at is the process of how you come up with the number, the
What
actual
number? What
number,
number?
the rate, whatever.
Okay.
How do you come up to the rate? The
Okay.
actual number is not that, I don't want to say it's not that important, but it's how you get to the number that's important more
How
than
you
the
get
number.
to the rates you're going to charge people for electricity.
Exactly, exactly. So when we were discussing, for example, in the depreciation, there are different methods of doing depreciation. And we have to look at, okay, are you going to depreciate everything equally? Are you going to divide them into groups? Are you going to do them individually and assign different numbers to each individual item? Um, and at the same time, you have to look at what is practical in our context, because you don't want to do work just for doing work's sake. It has to be meaningful and efficient, because if you're working efficiently, then you will actually get to a lower price. So it's not just saying we're going to give them like an increase because they ask for an increase and they need the increase. No, we're gonna look at the steps which we need to go through to come to a rate, and then the numbers plug in and you get the rate, which whatever it is, it is.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, if you do it properly, over time you get the benefit. I think too many times we look at w- just the short term, what can benefit me tomorrow. No, sometimes you have to take some short term pain for long term gain. So it's just one of those things. It's more looking at the process than looking at the number.
Yes, so thank you, Jason. Mr. Case, so the other document that is up for review is Domlec's weighted average cost of capital for finding rates of returns for investors. Can you explain that to us, please?
Okay, so I'll start and Connie will continue. But the weighted average cost of capital includes the rate of, it's as it said, average, okay? A weighted average. So it includes the cost of equity and the cost of debt for to Domlec. Now, there's a formula that is used to calculate this weighted average cost of call that have a lot of different components that are too technical to delve into on this program.
Right.
However, in simple terms, it is the return, the rate of return that more or less is arrived at for Domlec. Now, that rate of return is not just a rate of return on the investor's stake in the utility. It is also a rate of return on Domlec's, what Domlec utilizes its assets to provide the service that it provides. Okay, so obviously, as you may well know, you probably have your household and you buy groceries, you have to pay utility bills, you have to different costs associated with your livelihood. It is a similar thing for Domlec. Domlec has assets that it utilizes providing its service, and it has to maintain those assets. It has employees that work within Domlec. It has to buy fuel, not fuel, but oil, among other necessities in terms of maintaining its generators. Okay, it has to maintain its lines. Poles get rotten, they have to be changed. Employees that work well may be entitled to an increase. So that rate of return feeds into all of that. Okay, the viability of the utility. Domlec may introduce a new section to let us say, go into some other area of business. They have to populate that section with staff and equipment and transportation. So the rate of return will allow them to do so. It also covers, to a certain extent, the cost of inflation that Domlec may encounter in purchasing items required for providing the service. So let us say in 2021, it bought wire at, let's say, $1. In 2023, that same wire will not cost $1. So Domlec has to be able to be financially secure to be able to pay for that wire without having to come to the IRC every year saying we want to adjustment in rates or anything like that. I must express here that the rate review takes place every 3 years. And so when we do a rate review at the end of every 3 years, we look at the rates again and we make adjustments accordingly.
Okay. And again, based on Jason's correction, we're looking at how is Domlec getting to the rate to be charged for electricity. Is that correct, Jason? Did I say it correct this time? Okay, the laugh means yes, right? So we're looking at the documents that are taken into consideration as we're doing the rate review. So the next one is Domlec's cost of service study with load research. Mrs. Joseph Louis, can you tell us about that? The cost of service study with load research. So in a nutshell, what we're looking at, everything that is taken into consideration when Domlec is looking at the rates to charge for electricity in Dominica. So these are all the aspects that are taken into consideration in that equation. So the cost of service study with load research. Tell us about that. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
The cost of service studies takes into consideration the rates to be charged per category of customers. So we have commercial, industrial, hotel, and customers. And we, of course, take into consideration whether it's time of use we are going to consider for each category of customers. So we will have the rate based on if it's an off-peak or an on-peak rates at certain time that will be charged to the customers. And the load forecast more or less helps in more or less determine what the average tariff will be. So once you factor all the critical components, you arrive at the required revenue, or what we call the revenue requirement. That is the amount of money Domlec is supposed to make within a year on the normal operation. You factor the forecasted, the load forecast. So you divide the revenue requirement by the load forecast. So that is the approach, that is the methodology. Once you get that average tariff is broken down and shared among each category of customers using the level of demand, if it's a peak demand, if it's on peak or off peak, which is allocated for each customer. In this current tariff, as it exists right now, we do not have time of use. But in the tariff, as part of the tariff process, we are proposing, we are considering one option, introducing time of use for different category of customers. So at certain time, we are proposing that the rate might be a little cheaper. At certain hours, it might be a little more expensive. So, for example, the day rate might be higher than the evening rate. So it's up to customer. Customer has a choice in utilizing energy at certain time. So it has its pros and cons. So therefore, you know what the rate is at different timeline, and therefore how you want to use your electricity. So in a nutshell, that is what the cost of service is, how you allocating the rates per customers, per category of customers, and they of course have to be mindful as to the level of demand at different intervals.
Yeah, and that would make sense because even here in the US, that is actually how electricity works because there's off peak and there's on peak. So, if you're trying to do your laundry, chances are you probably shouldn't wait on Saturday because the rates of electricity are higher on Saturday. So we talked about the revenue requirement. What is the 5-year investment plan? So Dominic's 5-year investment plan as we look at the rates that are being proposed for 2025, the 5-year investment plan. Anyone can feel free to jump in.
Okay, well, the 5-year investment plan more or less looked at what investment Dominic want to undertake within a 5-year period. So, of course, they have their strategic plan. They, of course, are guided by the SREP, what we call Sustainable Resilient Energy Plan, as to what generating assets, what investment they want to take into whether they want to undertake any capital project, whether they want to buy any equipment. So they have that at the core of their business plan, their strategic plan, and based on that, they may say how they want the company to be within the 5-year period, and then they allocate a budget. Just like how we among ourselves, we get our pay and we set aside a budget as to what we want to achieve at certain time and how we are able to raise that money. Same thing, all companies have that avenue of establishing their budget and establishing what investment. So of course, Dominic will send us their 5-year investment plan. The investment plan more or less is critical so that IRC is able to review certain assets that Dominic would want to commission at certain time of the year or within any particular period. Now, the capital investment plan also forms part of what we call the rate base, which is used in determining what the revenue requirement is. So as we have been talking about the processes that is undertaken in deriving the formula or deriving the calculation. The capital investment plan, we focus what their capital investment will be within a 3-year period, and we factored it into determining what the revenue requirement is.
Mm-hmm.
And of
Yes.
course, that will help the IRC to guide the IRC as to whether or not they are overstating their assets, their investment. We look at the implementation capability, because sometimes you may have a situation whereby somebody may say, oh, we want this, we want this, we want this, but in reality, whether or not they are able to implement those activities or those projects. So in assessing Dominic's capital investment plan, we look at whether or not the implementation capability for the amount that they are requesting per annum, per per annum is realistic or justifiable.
Right. And the final of the documents that are being taken into consideration for this rate review is Domlec's rate proposal. Who would like to speak on that?
Okay, so I will speak on that and Connie can chip in after. The red proposal is the final stage of the tariff review process. Okay, what it establishes is the rate that will be applied to the various category of customers for DOMEC to meet its revenue requirement. Okay, so that's the final output. Okay, so that's now has it will be the final document that will be taken to consultation as per the IRC's transparency requirements, and so the customer can weigh in as to what they think. It will be the most controversial also because of the fact that everyone is concerned about what the cost of electricity will be. Okay, so we are hoping to conclude the exercise in early of first quarter 2025. That is still dependent on a lot of other factors, but that's what we are aiming for. And we will definitely be coming to the public to weigh in on that. They may have ideas that we never considered. Or they may have other in concerns that we need to address. So we're giving them the opportunity to do so. Connie, you can also speak to that part of the process.
Well, as Mr. Case alluded, the rate proposal is, I think it's the core of the entire rate process. It's like what will be the rate to be the best rate to be charged for each kilowatt of energy per customer category. So of course, once people hear the word rate, that will entice them to know, okay, whether the rate is going up or whether the rate is going down or whether rate is will remain same, because at the end of it all, it affects our bottom line, it affects our pulse. So we have been having a series of public consultation, which start off first with the depreciation, followed by the work. The next leg is the revenue requirement. Then you have the cost of service studies, and in the final analysis is what will be the rate. So all the critical components that we carried on when where we undertook a lot of comprehensive review of Domlec's information, where we justified, where we raised questions, where we raised issues, where we ourselves disallow certain items, allow certain items, collaborated, we had collaborative discussion. The final leg is what will be the exact rate, how the rate will impact on customers. So that is the driving point of it all. What
Yeah,
will
thank you for that. And you know, we have to continue to take into consideration the concerns that the public have already offered regarding electricity in Dominica. So, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there already just recently another increase in the rates of electricity in Dominica? So, how does that align with the IRC review, the rate review that is going on right now, if we're already seeing increase in rates in electricity in Dominica?
So no, there wasn't an increase in the rate of electricity.
There wasn't.
Um, no, 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 no. I guess actually, Mr. Case has the real dates on when all of this happened, but sometime in the past there was a penalty imposed on Domlec, and basically the penalty was removed. That's all it was.
Tell us more about that. In
Mr. Case.
layman's term.
Okay, yes, all right. So in 2003, the Act of 1996 was amended. It was amended specifically to introduce a penalty onto DOMLEC for two reasons. Okay. Now, I must be, I want the listeners to understand that DOMLEC was privately owned at that time. Okay. The two reasons that the penalty was applied was one, so that they could engage in competitive procurement of fuel. Okay. What I mean by that, they should seek proposals from fuel suppliers, different fuel suppliers, to obtain the best price. The best price usually would be the lowest price that the provider can give to the utility. The second reason was that DOMLEC was utilizing high-speed generation generators to do base load. Now I know this sounds it's kind of a little difficult to explain, but let me see if I can try. When a utility company uses high-speed generators for base load, they tend to use more fuel. So it is preferable in the industry to utilize medium speed or low speed generators. The preference is medium speed. What is the result of that in simple terms? It uses less fuel. Okay? Over the years, DOMLEC has complied with this in the direction that the penalty forced them to apply. So they fulfilled the competitive fuel procurement, and they also, moving forward, have installed 3 medium speed engines or generators in 2009 and another one in 2021. Okay, all that translates to less fuel, which will translate to a lower cost to the customer. Okay, it so happened that the penalty was applied onto the fuel surcharge.
Which
And
is part of the tariff.
yes, it is part of the tariff, which is passed on to the customer. So it's not an increase specifically. What I call it is the normalization of the fuel surcharge by the removal of the penalty. So it is what the customer will truly pay, irrespective. So, and furthermore, it is contradictory to say that it is an increase, whereby we haven't concluded the tariff review process, and then someone goes and announces that there's an increase due to a removal of a penalty. Okay. Furthermore, I must add that the utility now is government owned. So a penalty, why would you take a hammer and knock your toe? So there are many reasons, but the main reasons I stated are the reasons DOMLEC fulfilled those reasons, so the penalty was no longer applicable. So it was removed. And
Thank you for that.
This was decided since in 2008, thereabout 2008, when they approached the IRC for its removal, and it was decided that it would be removed upon when we are engaging in a successful tariff review process. So we are only fulfilling the decision that was made since 2008.
Yes, thank you for that explanation. And everyone listening and viewing, we know it's a lot of information, so don't forget that you can catch the replay where you can slow down, you can digest the information, you can go back to a certain point. If there was something you did not understand, you can go back to the beginning of the program. So keep in mind, Q95 FM radio, on Facebook and YouTube, also Q95DA.com. We usually have the videos uploaded there. And there's also a podcast segment that we don't often talk about on Q95. So if you're on the homepage of Q95, you can click on the tab that says Podbean, and you can catch the podcast of this entire information. So again, YouTube Q95 FM radio, Facebook Q95 FM radio, as well as Push Past 10 or Q95DA.com, www.q95da.com, and you can click on the podcast option so you can catch the entire program again, because we know it's a lot of information, but we want to make sure that we are all understanding this information because it has implication for everyone in Dominica. So we're going to go over to the studio in just a minute so you can engage with us via the phone if you choose to do so. But we still have a whole lot more to cover as we look at the national energy policy, Dominica's pursuit of 100% renewable energy in 2023. And we're also, interested in learning about the importance of the public consultation, exactly what we are hoping to achieve with the public consultation. But if you tuned in late, you're listening to Roots Connections on Q, and we are here with the IRC, and they're talking about the rate of electricity moving forward in Dominica. We are joined by the Executive Director, Mr. Justin Case, and the Financial Analysis, Mrs. Connie Joseph Louis, and the Projects Officer, Mr. Jason Timothy. So Lambi, let me go over to you as you invite our callers to join the conversation.
You were listening and viewing Roots Connection in Q. The numbers to connect with us are as follow: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257. Those are local numbers. The overseas or international number is 305-432-9624. Let me run those numbers one more time. 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, and 305-432-9624. Back to you, Simone.
Yes, thank you, Lambi. And we have a couple of comments on Facebook. So we have Yuget Centilere. Hi, good night. Interesting topic. I'm listening. And then she also says, so is the last concern of rate review take into consideration that salaries haven't been raised for the last 30 years of my working life? Anyone wants to take that question?
Okay, so I would like to take that question. We live in a real world, and unfortunately, the financial system, the way it is designed, things tend to increase. Okay, so let us take a hypothetical situation that, let us say hypothetically, that the tariff may increase. What the IRC did, or what it did, was it looked at the current structure, which is a very linear structure. So what I mean by linear, if the base rate is 50 cents, as Connie implied, let's just, for example purposes, let's just use that, and you do 50 kilowatt hours, then it is 50 times 50 kilowatt hours. Okay, the IRC looked at the linearity of the existing structure, and it decided that it's archaic and it needs to be changed. So now we are introducing a different structure with what we call time of use. So time of use, basically, there are two periods. One we call the peak time, and one we call the off-peak time. So this is like a trade-off in the event that the tariff rises, to give customers a choice. Okay? It will still apply to the other categories that cannot move certain things to the off-peak periods. So the peak periods will be, the rates during the peak periods will be higher than the off-peak periods. Okay, so customers can shift their loads or their consumption to off-peak periods. That's those loads that they can shift. And even those they cannot shift, for example, air conditioning, due to climate change, we're experiencing very hot periods during the day as well as during the night. So The off-peak periods are usually during the night until the next morning. And customers can, just for as an example, install an air conditioning unit that they probably couldn't afford before to keep them cooler at night so they can sleep better. That is just an example. Okay, there may be other practical management of that time space of periods of time that customers can appeal to, even in their businesses and otherwise. Okay, so uh, based on the data analysis, we also recognize that people usually take advantage of low rates during when the rates are low, because we have data that shows that when the tariff, the fuel surcharge, sorry, is low, then there's usually an increase in consumption. And that is seems to be a natural trend that occurs when the rate is lower. Okay, so the theory behind the time of use basically is that during the peak periods, Domlec has to deploy more generation to meet the peak. Okay, during the off-peak periods, the generation is lower. So that tends to feed into the whole theory of peak and off-peak. All right. It is a trade-off, and we hope that customers can understand and therefore be able to take advantage of that trade-off. Okay. As at this point, we still don't know the exact rates will be for the different categories and for the off-peak and on-peak periods. However, this is the basic um, structure that we can share with you at this time.
Yes, and thank you for that. So far we've talked about the documents that are being reviewed, the tariff-related documents being reviewed for the increase or decrease in electricity. But a question that comes to mind just off the bat before we even continue. So since we're talking about a change in the rate of electricity, so far we've kind of leaned towards an increase. But can the IRC come back and recommend a decrease in the tariff, a decrease in the rates of electricity?
Technically, it can. Um, whether that is a practical consideration is still left to be seen because things haven't been finalized yet. So yeah, I mean, as I said, technically it can, but I wouldn't say yes, I wouldn't say no. We just have to kind of go through the process and
Mhm.
see what the computer spits out at the end.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Now, we're also taking into consideration consultants with stakeholders before issuing the final decision. Can you tell us who are the stakeholders we're referring to that will be consulted before the final decision?
Okay, so the consultations are with not just the general public, but we've invited groups such as DIC, Hoteliers Association. We have some consumer related, some people who represent consumers. So, and the stakeholder consultations are actually open to the public, so the public can come. Whilst we invite certain people, all the documentation is published on the IRC website and can be downloaded to be looked at, and anybody can come and give their opinion on what has been the process, the which has been chosen. And it can't be, I don't like it because the rate is high. It has to be based on some sort of logic that, okay, this process is not the best because this study in XYZ has shown that that process is better. So it's not just come and say, I don't like it because the rate is going high. There has to be some fundamental principle behind arguing against what is being presented.
Right. So pretty much there has to be an objection to a part of the process.
Yes.
Don't just come and say, well, I don't like this because it seems like the rate of electricity will go up based on what you're talking about. Now, we've been talking a lot about the public engagement, the public consultation. So, what is the goal of these public consultations? And also, what weights will the views of the public, what weight will it have with the final decision? So if you have what percentage of the public objecting to part of the process, how will that be factored into the final decision?
At the end of the day, the IRC and Dominica have the, let's call it, discussions, disagreements on how things go forward. But that doesn't mean we, between us and them, we've explored every single possibility. There are, Dominica is full of smart people, and it's very possible that one of them could come up with a suggestion that says, okay, whilst you used John Thomas's model for this, did you consider using Philip Brown's model, which worked in Indonesia? And they had a lot of success. Their system is similar to ours, blah, blah, blah. And we can go and look at it and say, okay, we never considered that. That makes sense. Um, so there is possibility, but as I say, it has to be grounded in principle, study, facts, not feelings, facts.
Mr. Case, you wanted to add something?
Jason basically covered everything. I mean, a properly functioning democracy, consultation is part of the process. We want to be fair with the customers. We want to give them the opportunity to constructively criticize or make recommendations. We will consider those recommendations or comments or whatever inputs they supply seriously, and before finalizing the decision. Okay, so consultation is it works, provided that it is done properly.
Now, is there also opportunities for Dominicans who live overseas to be a part of the public consultation?
Yes, our next consultation will be a hybrid, where people can connect remotely to it as well as be in person, and this is to afford people in locations around the world to participate.
Yes, and what I'm going to do in a
Siobhan,
minute. Yes, go ahead.
even apart from that, in our previous consultations, whilst the oral part, I guess, has been local, there has been ample opportunity for, we're in the digital age. Anybody could download the document and email in their concerns, which the IRC would consider. So it's not something where the comments have to be that you necessarily attend the consultation. It can be supplied electronically.
Yeah, and what has been the feedback from the public so far? Because you've had public consultations already, right? What has been the feedback from the public?
Well, so far, the feedback has been very positive. Our first consultation on the depreciation study, we had over 40 participants of diverse backgrounds, and we could say it went well. People voiced they tried to understand what it was all about, and when we explained it and tried to explain it in simple terms, they were able to contribute meaningfully. Our second consultation was not that well attended, but there were some people that attended that were knowledgeable in the subject matter, and they were able to critically give critical inputs that we we could respond to. They provided questions that we could respond to that led to a positive outcome. We had people, professional accountants that attended, and they actually posed questions that we had to answer so that they could better understand. It was also streamed online, live, so people could participate by asking questions online, but also it was poorly attended. But this time around, we are trying the hybrid approach, and we are trying to ensure that we attract as many participants as possible, both online as well as in person, because we are getting closer and closer towards the end, and we definitely need to have constructive input so that we can, if there's anything that we need to correct or change, we will definitely do so, as long as the arguments provided are formidable and we can understand the background to it.
Yes, thank you for that. And I've already gone ahead and included the websites and the email address for anyone looking for more information. So for those listening on the radio, that website is www.ircdominica.org. So again, www.ircdominica.org. And the email address, if you would like to send an email for more information, is communications with an S, communications.officer@ircdominica.org. So again, communications.officer@ircdominica.org. Now, something else that came to mind as well, we talked about, we mentioned it before, is Dominica's pursuit of 100% renewable energy in 2020. So let's talk about that national energy policy. Anyone wants to enlighten us by providing more information on this?
Okay, I'll start, and probably Jason and Connie can chip in. All right, so it's not 2020, it's 2030.
2030, thank you.
It was 100% electricity from renewable sources by 2030. We are well on our path to achieving that. The construction of the geothermal project has started and will be initially of 10 megawatts. Our peak is about 16, or let's say roughly 17 megawatts. So between the hydro and the geothermal will be at about 16. And there's a plan to add another 5 megawatts of geothermal 3 years after, depending on the growth of forecast or the growth of the load consumption by customers. So Dominica is really ahead of the curve compared to most other Caribbean islands, and we are looking forward to the successful commissioning of the geothermal plant when it is completed, and that should definitely take us closer to that target. By the way, I have to say that the National Energy Policy was ratified in 2021.
And tell us more about that.
Okay, so it basically provides the roadmap for Dominica attaining all its electricity from renewable sources. It speaks to other interventions within the sector, such as electric vehicles, as well as other possible energy, because energy is not just electricity. Okay, so it speaks to all the different forms of energy that are utilized by the society. And but in our case, we focus on the electricity sector and developments therein. So the National Energy Policy basically is the government's policy that guides these developments, and it is predicated on what we call a Sustainable Renewable Energy Plan, which was created, a report that was created, provided the roadmap for attaining that, which was done by the Clinton Climate Initiative in 2019. The report was produced in 2019. Okay, a copy of that report is on our website for people that are interested in looking at it. So it speaks to various technologies. It speaks to wind, it speaks to solar, it speaks to geothermal. At this point in time, geothermal is given the priority because it's the most formidable type of renewable energy. It can be, it's like having a diesel engine, but not running on diesel, but on steam from geo resources, which are which come from below the earth. Okay, so that's what it is. It is solar and wind are kind of intermittent, and though well, a lot of people tend to find it appealing, but for at utility level, solar and wind must be coupled with batteries so that you can secure the stability of the grid. At utility scale, it is not like you pursuing a system for your household and putting solar on your roof and figure, well, that's how it works at the utility scale. There are a lot of considerations. You have to consider grid stability, you have to consider protection, you have to consider the ability of these new technologies to work with the old legacy technologies such as synchronous diesel generators. There's a lot to it, and a lot of analysis has to be performed to ensure that one gets it right. Okay, and so it might be easily deployable, but these technologies all have their pros and cons, and at utility scale, it must be carefully weighed.
Mrs. Joseph Louis, anything you would like to add at this point?
Well, the only thing is that in terms of currently Dominic generation, 80% of it is produced by 20% is used by hydro. So the need, of course, is of great importance, particularly as it relates to like a cleaner form of energy. Um, Geothermal, of course, is a clean method of energy, and going down this way, we will be able to see less reliance on fuel, and at least getting closer to that national energy plan in the not too distant future.
Yeah, so I think it begs the question, based on the progress with the geothermal energy, what are the implications for the tariff, the rate of electricity? So can Dominicans expect to see a significant drop in the rate of electricity in Dominica, Jason?
The word significant is very, I would throw that out the window.
Troublesome.
Um, so the reason being, again, economies of scale. If we were operating in a bigger grid, that might be possible, but with the size of what is being done, I've in my professional capacity, I'm very reluctant to use the word significant. There may be a drop, but I guess, and I guess it depends on what your definition of significant is and what my definition of significant is. So
Yeah, because I think one of the concerns that the public would have is that millions of dollars have been invested in geothermal in Dominica. So, it's for that amount of money to be invested and then to not have a significant rate of return in terms of the reduction in the rate of electricity would be concerning, because I get the sense that this is burdensome for a lot of Dominicans. They are very concerned about the increasing rates of everything coupled with the increasing rates of electricity. Mr. Case, would you like to speak on that?
wait, let me.
Okay,
I
go ahead,
want to
Jason.
touch on that. The thing about it is, and I think we as a society, we need to do a little bit better in terms of our long term thinking. Yes, uh, uh, whether you have a small reduction now, and it stays there for the next 50 years, whereas everything for everybody else is going up, is is still significant. It we have to look at things holistically, the global, the long-term planning. Um, Sometimes we're too quick to look at tomorrow and not next year or 10 years down the line. And I think that is one of we this is an area where I think we as a people need to do better in terms of looking at the long term implications of what we do. So, I saying we spend millions of dollars, I think at the end of the day we need to accept that in life everything has a price. You have to pay, like, you may not pay today, you may not to pay tomorrow, but you may pay 10 years down the line. And we have to look at doing these when we're doing these projects, planning for long term and not just for tomorrow.
So what you're saying, it would be a cumulative benefit that there may not be, again, throwing out the word significant, but the small reductions in the rate, if you look at it accumulated over many years, would be a benefit to the consumer. Is that what you're saying?
Not only that, the fact that you are now no longer importing fuel, that means that's money which stays in your economy, because every drop of diesel which is imported to generate electricity is money which leaves our economy and goes outside. So if it stays within our economy and circulates within our economy, it's better for us. So it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more complex than just saying, I'm only saving a little bit of money, where this may lead to a better society. Because please notice the word "me."
Yeah, so the ripple effect is what you're referring to.
Yes, yes.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay,
Mr. K?
so yes, you called on me a while ago, right? So the benchmark that we use is the cost of fuel and its volatility. Okay, so with the geothermal plant, that volatility will not be as great as it is with the imported fuel. Okay, so that's one of the benefits. So the cost will be more or less stable with slight increases over short periods of time, but not like how we see with fuel. Today it could be 35 cents, tomorrow it's 45 cents, then the next day it is 70 cents. So at the end of the day, it will not, that kind of volatility will be eradicated. Okay, and I agree with Jason, that is the best way he could put it, because we like to see things in a singular short-term manner. It is not single. Life is not a linearity. It is
Right.
non-linear. It is very non-linear, and there are a lot of complex variables that come into play. So um, at this point, what I can say is better to have it than not to have it. And moving forward, if we can be totally independent of fossil fuel, there are other benefits, because we also contributing to reduction in the climate change or the rapidity of climate change by emitting less greenhouse gases out there. So all of this has to take on. It's not just the cost of the unit cost of the electricity, but all the other benefits that are added to it through which are never spoken about, like the reduction in greenhouse gases, and we are well on our way to meeting the millennial targets and all of that. So it's you have to see it in a holistic fashion. I mean, most people are just concerned on the impact on their pockets, but which is, I mean, understandable. But then there are other benefits that are not spoken about and not seen that are also important.
Yeah, sure. Let's go over to the studio for a quick call.
Good evening, caller. Thanks for joining us. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. I want to say good evening to all of the people on the panel. And I wanted to ask a question. Dr. Simon asked one of the, or the two gentlemen who have been speaking there about the cost of electricity in terms of how much the clientele is going to pay when the geothermal 10 megawatts will be in use. It seems to me the way he answered the question, he's not saying a no nor yes, but it seems to me something is bothering me in his response to your question. And I can recall, even I think it was in Parliament and some other occasions that the officials had in Dominica, and they spoke about the cost per, for electricity would drastically get lower than it is today. So the impression that I'm getting, if a kilowatt per hour is $1, based on what they say, I come to the conclusion that if it's $1 with the diesel production that we are producing, with the resources of diesel we are using to generate electricity, based on the amount of money that's been spent to import the diesel, maintenance of generators, and all that is calculated and all that was presented, based on what I understood, I don't know if my mind grasped this at a different level. But what they were saying is that electricity is going to be, there's going to be a huge difference in terms of kilowatt per hour produced through geothermal energy compared to the diesel energy. So there I have a question in the way that both of you answer the question. It's like there is something that you all don't want to be specific because you don't want to be blaming on the long run, because you're going to give people the assurance that electricity is going to be lower than it is today. Maybe it will be lower, but there's not going to be sort of a huge difference in terms of the pricing based on your response to Dr. Cindy Matthew's question. Thank you. I'd like that to be clarified, because as I said earlier on, some of the officials, members of government, spoke, I think in Parliament and outside of Parliament, that there's going to be a huge difference in terms of the cost for electricity domestically and commercially. So this is what I want you all to clarify for me, please, if it's possible.
Thank you, caller. Thank you for the question. Anyone, Jason, Mr. Case, you'd like to jump in on that?
The IRC is a public entity. However, we exercise a level of independence from the political directorate. And we are trying to be as truthful and transparent as we can be, and we let the methodology inform us as to what the final quantities will be. Now, with the geothermal, the cost, the feed-in tariff to the grid will be significantly lower. But then it is not the only input into the calculations for the rate for the customer. Okay, so you still have the other components of the tariff that come into play. This has to do with the securing the viability of Dominica, which involves the cost of its operations and maintenance of its assets. Okay, so we are not at the final stage of the tariff right now, so we are very careful not to say anything that the public will hold us to and say, oh, you said, well, it will be very lower and 50% and all of that and all of that. At the end of the day, that's not very accurate. We are here to provide with accurate information and do the best we can to balance the interests of the government, the utility, and the public. Okay, if we cannot frivolously say that it will be plenty lower or it will be plenty high at this point in time. Okay, by early next year, customers will have the actual quantities and see for themselves what it looks like. We will also be producing information on sample bills, which will compare with your current bill right now, and you'll see what your savings will be when we do those calculations. So there will be a lot of scenarios looked at, and we'll be putting that out there as soon as we conclude the exercise and have accurate rates that we can speak about and say, this is what it really is. And you can now say, well, if you're not happy with it or if you're happy with it. But we are trying our best to cut a balance here to ensure that the public is not and stakeholders are not unduly burdened with a high cost of electricity moving forward.
Yes, thank you. I think we have another call.
Good evening, caller. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
I can go ahead right.
Yes.
Interesting discussion.
Thank you.
Very professional and very balanced. One about the beginning of the
You may have to call back.
Yeah.
I beg your
Caller, you may have to call back because there's a problem with your transmission.
Please
Okay,
call back. Please call us back.
I'll use a different line.
Yes,
Yeah.
please do, and we'll await your call. Yes, but in the meantime, while we're waiting for the call, I think one of the questions, Mrs. Joseph Louis, customers might be interested in getting a response to is, how much of an increase are we talking about? And I'm just relaying questions. So keep that thought, hold that question in mind, and let's go back to the phone.
Go ahead, please, caller.
Yeah, good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Yeah, Mr. White hasn't been radio singing like before, and you understand. Jack Dr. Simon, you know that there. You know,
Hey.
me personally, what's up?
Good, doing well.
That's it. Everybody that's talking and talking and talking. Dominica need a drastic revolution according to blessing because it is raising up price, and people start already going up and nothing will happening. And what is the reason for Dominica? If all them rivers are happening, instead get the Dominica invest in the NEP, let them clean up the river so we will get more flow in the river than it's a hydro system with us paying bill and with us agreeing. What them to increase bill again for and saying about testing thing and all kind of things. Water go up, lights going up. Dominica so put up their prices on their plan. Digicel was only 15, the cotton now is 10. A pound of white sugar in my neck of the woods is $4. Every 1 cube is $1. A cooler is $1.50. Everything is going up. We need a revolution and a change of government. Bye bye.
Yes, thank you. So I think what the caller is saying is just the overall burden that a lot of people feel like they're experiencing in Dominica. So this is causing a lot of anxiety. It's causing people to be a lot of very anxious. So I'm so happy that you all are here to help us, to guide us through this process. Let's take another phone call.
Yes, caller, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me better now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, no, I just said the discussion is very, I like the way the discussion is proceeding.
Thank you.
Going through very solid, very professional. Thanks very much for that,
Yes, thank you.
And 2 points. One is that Mr. Case, when he answered your first question about the origins of the IRC and the fact about before the 2006 Act was passed, I want to mention that Dominica was in the grips of an IMF program. And in fact, it was very difficult that period. In fact, the IRC Act, the 2006 Act was drafted during that period while the IMF World Bank, it was also mentioned the World Bank because it was both of them, although sometimes we hear the term IMF program. But it was the IMF and the World Bank called the Stabilization and Adjustment Program. And during that period of time, the Act itself was drafted by a group, and I played a role in that drafting period, when the Act was drafted. So it was in response to the structural changes taking place in the wider economy. Remember, the banana industry collapsed around that time. And also, while Eugenia Charles was the Prime Minister, the government of Dominica owned Domlec. Somewhere along the line in the late 1990s, while EWP was there, it was sold. And there was certain conditions under which it had to operate. And therefore it was felt that in the whole restructuring of the economy that had to take place in the early 2000s going forward, the energy issue could not be ignored. As Mr. Case mentioned, IRC deals with electricity, but electricity is a core component of the wider energy issue, which is what they deal with currently. Finally, I want to say that the IRC, from my review of the systems in the CARICOM region, especially the OECS, the IRC is a He's a model. In other words, I like he's very professional, away from politics, and very well managed. And I hope we can stay on that course, on that trajectory. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, caller, for your contribution. Any feedback? Anyone wants to make a comment based on what the callers have said? Okay, so yes.
Yeah, the last caller seems to have insights on that led to the creation of the IRC. The creation of the IRC and the regulation or liberalized market was meant to be a benefit to customers. As I said, customers can choose to, if they find Domlec's cost of providing electricity is too high, they can decide to produce their own by appealing to various technologies that are cheaper and so on. It's unfortunate that prices keep rising and people's salaries remain the same. It is just a fact of, I don't know, life, I guess. So that's why we are trying our best to ensure that in the new structure, customers are given a choice. So let us say you're running your business, like right now, with the current rates, the rate is the same for 24 hours. Okay? With the new tariff, the rates will change. It'll be two different rates over a period, one rate over a period of 12 hours and another rate over the period of another 12 hours. So let us say you're, I don't know, a welder. Your profession is a welder.
Correct. I think it's 14 and 8 is what we were proposing, not 12 and 12. But
Okay, 14 and 8, right.
Yeah.
So let us say you're a welder.
So 14 is on peak and 8 is off peak?
Yeah. 14 and 10. Sorry, my maths is late night. Again, old.
Yes,
So
right.
10
So
10 is off peak.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's say you're a welder and you have the business of welding, creating these structures for people. You could shift your business to the lower tariff, which period, and get the benefit of that. So we, as I said, it's a trade-off, and it's up to the customer to utilize that to their benefit. Okay, and as I said, when we reach the last stage of the rate proposal, we'll be providing various against the benchmark of the existing tariff to show customers how they can benefit by utilizing the periods that will be built in to the new tariff structure. Okay, so that's we are trying our best and we put a lot of thought into it so that customers can benefit and it won't impact their pocket as they've seen it in a kind of linear fashion with the existing rates where you have a flat rate throughout the 24-hour period, irrespective of whether the utility uses more engines or less engines to meet the demand. At the end of the day, you have one flat rate. This is going to change, right? So that's what it is.
Yes, thank you for that. Mrs. Joseph Louis, let me come over to you. Yes, so all the frustration everyone is expressing over increasing rates. And I know there's not a definitive answer to this question, but is there like a percentage that customers can expect? Any insight that you can offer if the rate were to increase? What would that look like for customers?
Well, really, at this time, I am unable to give you an answer.
Right.
Because it's a process that results in a final outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And until we reach that end of that curve, we will know what it will be like.
Mm-hmm.
So from the offset, there are critical things that fit into each leg of our consultative document, or each leg of the process. For example, the larger your asset base, the larger your rates. The higher your weighted average cost of capital, what we call our rate of return, would be the higher the rates. You also have to factor your level of demand. all that will impact on the rate. So what I can say categorically clear is that at this time we are unable to say whether the rate is going up or down. What we can say, there will be a change in the rates. Um, there are certain things that were disallowed in terms of from the asset base that will be reflected in the final outcome of the rate. So what we are just asking the general public to be patient with us, participate in our consultation and see where that is heading. And at the end of it all, we know that their views and their concerns are important, and their views and their concerns will help us in making certain decisions, because on each of the consultative documents, we have questions that we pose to get their feedback. So as I indicated, the larger the your asset base, from a regulatory standpoint or from a regulation, there's something we call the regulated asset base. That is what the commission consider used and useful. So for example, there are certain things that we disallow from the rate base. If we are of the view that that asset will not be used and useful in within a tariff period, then we take it off. So is when the process is complete, we are just hoping that it will be affordable, and we are just hoping that if the stakeholders agree to the proposal of time of use, people will be better able to manage their electricity consumption and take advantage of probably washing their clothes in the evening, to allow for a lower rate. And that's just about it. But when
Yes.
that we do all what is necessary to ensure in the final outcome that there will be a rate that will be affordable, and not one that will result in persons unable to pay their bill, or a demise in the operation of the utility.
Yeah, and I think that is the silver lining in everything that we are talking about this evening, because while we cannot speculate in terms of the actual rates of electricity come January 2025, I think the silver lining is if that option would come into existence, where there's an off peak and there's a peak season time period, where consumers know that maybe I should wash my laundry at 10 p.m. And, then it comes the fact of, well, most people are tired at 10 p.m., but sometimes we have to make sacrifices in order to gain the benefit. So in my mind, that is where I'm seeing the silver lining, the idea of having a peak period and an off-peak period that consumers can take advantage of. But I wanted to go back to something we talked about before. So we talked about the IRC overseeing the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity. We talked about some of the functions, such as establishing rules and guidelines for electricity supply. We talked about the review of the tariff. But I also see here that the IRC investigates customer complaints and appeals. Can anyone tell us more about this?
Yes, that's one. So, Connie, let me just start off and I'll switch on to you.
Yeah.
That is one of our mandates, that we address customer complaints and also issues that Dominic may have with customers from time to time. Okay, so how it works is that the customer must approach Domlec if they are dissatisfied with any situation that they may encounter with Domlec, be it inaccurate billing, be it the estimate for extension of a line, whatever it is. They must approach the utility first, and it must be done in writing. At the end of the day, if they're not happy with Domlec's response, then they can come to the IRC and with their paper trail and submit it and state their case. The IRC will then proceed to investigate and get the facts and try to resolve the complaint amicably between Domlec and the person or the entity. This over the years, we have had quite a significant success in resolving customer complaints in a amicable manner so that the customer gets a fair resolution. Connie can give you a little more detail on that.
Yeah, but before you jump in, let me just also state the email address again, communications.officer@ircdominica.org if you would like to pursue that route. Yes, go ahead, Mrs. Joseph Louis.
Well, in a nutshell, Mr. Case mentioned the entire process. So,
okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Yes. And we have a couple of comments on Facebook, so let's make sure we're engaging with our audience. Everson Maglaw says we will get a reduction in our bills. Well, we think we addressed that question already. We also have Everson, or the cost of fuel will be spread out in the economy because of geothermal. So guys, can you just take notes of any of these questions or comments you would like to respond to? We have Lennon Matthew. And he says, where is the levelized cost comparison? You can do financial modeling to show the long-term cost benefits using data on consumption from past 10 years, create future scenarios, and test financial models. He continues by saying, show us the financial models and cost comparison. Forward thinking would require a power generation plant tied to production of goods and services, development of electricity only to give people lights is not the most efficient use of power. Anyone would like to respond to Lennon's comments?
He's correct, and the cost of service study will actually in the cost of service study, financial models will be utilized, and he's correct on this fact that just having electricity to produce lights or power for customers or residential customers is not just the way to go. What I can say to that is that there are a lot of projects on stream, hotel projects along the West Coast, other commercial and industrial level projects that will be utilizing power in a more beneficial and commercial way towards the type of thinking that he's trying to promulgate. At the end of the day, these projects are still they're not completed. So we are hoping, based on our projections, that these projects will be completed within the next, 5 years. So all of that has been looked at. When we are doing our modeling, we look at what activities are going on within the economy that will utilize energy at that level, and therefore make it less burdensome to the residential customers. Okay, so in the tariff modeling, you tend to find that you have the different categories of customers. The residential customers tend to use for domestic purposes, and the commercial, industrial, and hotel customers tend to use it for commercial purposes. And I think what the caller was saying, or the person that sent the comments, they were saying that basically that electricity should be used for more formidable purposes in terms of commercial and that type of activity. So we are aware of that, and these types of activities will increase in the near future. And that's all I can say at this point, because we collect data on projects that are already completed, as well as those that are in process. And we try to estimate as to the best of our ability when these projects will come online and create activity to utilize the energy that will be produced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. And, we still have so many questions, but the time is running out. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, and just to add, we in-house, we do have financial models that help us to determine what the levelized cost of energy will be. But that is for more or less internal use, and that will help us to trend certain outcome given applicable scenarios that we use in-house. But for the rate review, we use the data set that we receive from Domlec to determine what the final outcome will be. But of course, we have financial models in-house, as I said, to guide us in trying to formulate certain trend. But for this exercise, we use the data set provided by Domlec, and we review it, we do comprehensive review to justify the reasonableness of the values or the accuracy of the values.
Yeah, so we have one more question before we wind down this evening. And here I see the tariff review will culminate with Domlec's submission of its rate proposal. The process is expected to be completed in Q1 of 2025. Jason, can you tell us about this? Domlec's submission of its rate proposal, first quarter of 2025.
Well, it's just a matter of by then we expect all the other pieces to be complete and approved. And then Domlex makes their final submission to the IRC, which we then come to stakeholders and sit down, and hopefully everybody says, wow, good job, guys. And life's a dream, but I know that's not how it's going to happen. So.
Yes, so I want to thank you for being here. I think this was very informative. I think we took a topic that by nature is very technical, and we tried our best to break down the terminology and to educate the public on the work of the IRC. And I think very importantly, we talked about the fact that the IRC and Domlec and the government are not in cahoots to increase the rates. The IRC is an independent, that's why it's called the Independent Regulatory Commission. They're an independent body working to regulate the rate of electricity in Dominica. We have several consultations coming up. I'm looking here, October 29th, November 12th, November 26th, December 3rd through the 10th. So again, for anyone wanting more information on the IRC and everything we spoke about this evening, please visit www.ircdominica.org. One more time, www.ircdominica.org. So let's just go around the room one more time for your final thoughts as we wind down for this evening. Mr. Case, let's begin with you.
Yes, I would like to thank all our listeners and participants on this program. I encourage them to participate, and their inputs will be taken seriously. And when it is evaluated and assessed, if it is something worthwhile, we will definitely give it the credence that it requires. So my final words is to encourage the public and stakeholders to participate. We do not want a situation that when the rates are implemented, people are saying that, they didn't have any idea, they were not involved, the IRC doing what it wants in courts with Domlec. That is not the case. Okay, so we are trying to, it's a very difficult balancing act, but we are trying our best to please everybody. So please, we invite you again to participate and give your comments, give your ideas, share your ideas. We'll see how we can apply these ideas if they are worthwhile to our process.
Yes, thank you. Mrs. Joseph Louis, over to you.
Okay, I must say it was a fruitful exercise.
Yes.
We raised our concern. Our next consultation is on the 13th of November, where we will be discussing the revenue requirement. That's another critical component of the process of the tariff process. And of course, we said that's going to be a hybrid approach whereby persons can engage online. Um, and it's, of course, of great interest to us if people express their concerns, if people raise their questions, seek clarification, participate in the consultation. That will be for the greater good or the greater benefit of all. Where we ensure that we have a process that's transparent and customer or stakeholder views were taken on board or their concerns were taken into consideration in arriving at a just and reasonable decision.
Yes, thank you. Yes,
Dr. If you have a slight correction,
yes.
the date of consultation is now November 19th. Okay, the
Okay.
13th was one of something else proposed, but Domlec, which is the main stakeholder, could not be present at that. So it will be changed. Well, that was the original date that was being considered, but it has changed. So it will
And
be
where will
November
it be?
19th at the Prevo Cinemall conference room. That's where that's the venue.
Time and the time?
From 3 p.m. From 3 p.m. to 3
So
p.m. to
November
6.
19th, 3 p.m., Prevo Cinema.
Yes, and then this at the location is equipped with hardware to ensure that we can accommodate people at remote locations anywhere in the world through the internet. So that's where it will be held. Yes.
Yeah, and will the link for those who are outside of Dominica, will that be available on the website?
It will be available on the website, and also it will be disseminated through other media electronically.
Okay, so please send it to me and I'll be happy to share it with my audience as well.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Jason.
No, I think my colleagues have done a good job, and we thank everybody for their participation. It was a good interactive session. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for being here. And I also want to remember to thank Ms. Idona John Baptist, the communication specialist for the IRC. Thank you for reaching out to me so we could put this program together. So thank you everyone for being here, our listeners, our callers, our Facebook and YouTube audience for your participation. And don't forget, the White Sunset event is in full swing right now. Last year at this time, I was at that event, so I certainly encourage everyone there's still time to head on over to Kaimamamwe in Castle Comfort for the White Sunset Charity event. Last year, we raised $20,000 for the benefit of organizations in Dominica. And this year, we're hoping to top that off by raising even more money, which will go towards 2 organizations that support the disabled. So again, I want to thank you for being here for another episode of Roots Connections on Q, where we talked to the Independent Regulatory Commission on the rates of electricity going forward. If you have a topic idea, you're looking for a platform to have a similar conversation, you can always reach me at pushpast10@gmail.com. So that is pushpast10.com. And you can reach me and let me know what you would like to propose. So again, thank you for being here. Don't forget to follow Q95 FM Radio and Push Past 10 on Facebook, and to subscribe to the YouTube channels as well. So again, we want to thank everyone for their participation in this program, where we continue to navigate a world where change is the only constant, where we harness the power of technology, international radio, social media, and podcasts to leverage the skills and talents of our experts worldwide for the benefit of Dominica and the Caribbean region. Lambi, thank you as always, showing Mr. G, all the Q95 family. Thank you. Happy Independence. I won't see you until after independence. So happy Independence, Dominica. Peinu Kadonu is the theme for independence this year. So wherever you are, remember to celebrate and feel the rejuvenation of the celebration of our culture brings to us. You know, my little madras, I don't know if anybody noticed.
Yes.
But thank you guys. It was wonderful having this conversation with you. So until next time, I am Simone Matthew, and you have yourself a pleasant rest of the evening. You can say bye to the audience, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Until
you.
next time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again.
Yes, you're welcome. And
All right.
Lambi, don't forget to turn off the StreamYard. Thanks.
Roots Connections on Q, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. every other Wednesday on Q95, the big station. Dominicans journeyed beyond our shores for decades in search of economic opportunities and educational advancement. Many are ready to give